couple of practical issues to highlight. We have no fire drill planned tonight, so if there's a fire alarm, please make your way out of the building in a calm and orderly fashion as guided by staff. People with mobility issues should gather in the foyer on the left-hand side as you leave the chamber near the balustrade, where assistance will be provided. Toilets are at the far end of the corridors either side of the chamber, ladies to the left as you leave and gents to the right. May I ask that if you need to leave and return to the council chamber during the meeting, you ensure the doors do not slam after you. Please note that the meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. Apologies have been received from Councillors Price, Thomas, Worley and Francis. So I have a few announcements to make as Deputy Lord Mayor. The first of which is I'm sure that the whole council would be absolutely delighted in sending our congratulations to Councillor Schmierer and Jen on your new arrival. So congratulations. Do you want to tell us about your new baby?
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. About 3.5 weeks ago, my wife gave birth to a little boy called Justin. So he's not here tonight, but I'm sure you'll see and hear of him certainly in coming weeks and months. Thank you very much.
Yes, so congratulations on behalf of all of us. On to other matters. It was a real pleasure to attend the Living Wage Week event at Theatre Royal, where it's really good to hear some of the excellent work that's been done in our city, supported by the council, but supported by all those employers, especially the one that has recently become not only a living wage employer, but a living hours employer and a living pensions employer, which I think is a fantastic achievement. On the 10th of November was Remembrance Sunday, and I was pleased to be able to join both Councillor Sands and the Lord Mayor at the South Africa Memorial ahead of other remembrance activities that happened in the city. Last Thursday was the celebration evening for Norfolk YMCA, which happened at the Space up in North Norwich, and it was really powerful hearing from some of those people who are supported by the YMCA about their journey of hope and transformation in what was a really special evening. And last Friday, I joined the Sheriff for a sleep out at the Cathedral, where we raised money for the Benjamin Foundation, which is this year's civic charity, and we're able to talk to some of the other people who are raising money for that charity and hear from the charity about some of the various schemes that they have supporting young people. I'm now going to ask the Head of Paid Service to make an announcement. Please note that there will be no discussion or questions on the announcement. Any questions should be put in writing to the Chief Executive directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Councillors, I'm taking the slightly unusual step of addressing you directly this evening as the Council's Head of Paid Service. I've taken this step as I feel it's essential for me to provide a clear statement in response to the recent conversations that have been circulating on the Council's use of expert interim and agency staff. After the pandemic, you will be aware that we've seen an upward trend in the number of interim staff and agency workers. Norwich City Council is a great place to work. We have a strong offer in terms of our overall employee package. However, despite multiple recruitment campaigns for some key and critical roles, we have still not been able to attract the right type of candidates. National recruitment difficulties faced by local councils are widely reported and remain challenging, particularly for senior roles, statutory roles, and in specialist areas of the business. I emphasise that we are not alone in this challenge. We have used interim and agency staff to add expert capacity in certain areas to drive forward the ambitious projects that contribute to delivering our community-led plan. Expertise we don't always have at the Council. Without this expertise, we would not have achieved the progress we have across our major projects programme. We also recognised the need to improve standards of service delivery in some areas, whilst continuing to be ambitious for the city. This required temporary capacity and expert solutions to drive turnaround in our housing services, for example, where a regulatory notice had been issued for health, safety and compliance failings. That work is complete and led to the successful removal of the regulatory notice and a clean bill of health, meaning we addressed the compliance issues affecting hundreds of residents living in council homes across the city. There are also certain areas of the business where we deliberately use agency staff as part of our workforce management strategy, for example, to provide additional capacity at certain points in the year, or to manage short-term vacancies on a rolling basis. In terms of where we are now, I can provide some helpful comparative data for you. The Q2 figure for 23-24, July to September, showed that we had 72 interim and agency workers. The most recent data we have, which takes us up to the early part of this month, demonstrates a significant fall in the numbers from 72 to 42. This in turn, of course, has reduced our spend on interims and agency workers. And finally, Deputy Lord Mayor, I would like to set out the steps that my executive leadership team and I are taking to continue to ensure that the Council's interim and agency spend is kept under review. We actively monitor spend at a senior officer level, and we have clear pathways to permanent recruitment where possible. All new requests for agency or interim staff are robustly considered by a vacancy management panel, and where agency or interim staff are needed for a specific project, costs are considered as part of that overall project investment. As your head of paid service, I remain committed to delivering our agreed priorities and the ambitions that sit alongside them for our residents and for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have any declarations of interest to make on any of the items on the agenda? No, thank you. We now move on to questions from the public. We've received 5 public questions. The first is from Ms. Jane Overhill. Ms. Overhill, would you please ask your question?
Thank you. St Leonard's Estate and Ladbroke Place in Thorpe Hamlet has 86 properties which are listed and in a poor state of repair due to a lack of investment. Can you please tell me specifically what further work you need to do with regard to the surveying of the current situation and the design development, how long this is expected to take, plus a timescale for consultation with tenants and leaseholders, and an expected start date for the work to commence? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, would you please give your reply?
Thank you for the question. The Property Services team is in the process of preparing a specification of works for the renewal of front porches, new front doors and intercom systems at both Ladbroke Place and St Leonard's. In addition, surveys are in progress in each block to scope works and costs required ahead of undertaking leaseholder consultation in conjunction with the home ownership team, which is anticipated to commence in January 2025. Works are anticipated to start on site late spring 2025.
Thank you. Ms. Overhill, you're allowed 1 supplementary question. Do you have a supplementary question?
I don't, thank you.
Thank you. The second question is from Mr. Cavan Stewart. Mr. Stewart, would you please ask your question?
Many hedgehogs nest in Rosary Cemetery. The grounds are maintained by the council and the Friends of Rosary Cemetery. To protect the hedgehogs, the Friends sweep the areas to be cut back so that where hedgehogs are nesting or resting, they can either be left to nest or they move on from nesting before the cutback or mowing begins. What are the council doing in the cemetery when they maintain the grounds to prevent injury to hedgehogs before they start their ground maintenance? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hampton, would you please give your reply?
Thank you, Cavan, for your question. It's widely known amongst council and NCSL staff that there is a need to take extra care when working in the conservation area of a Rosary Cemetery because of the hedgehogs. So we carry out minimal maintenance within the cemetery where we are aware that there are hedgehogs nesting, and we liaise closely with the Friends of Rosary Cemetery, who carry out most of the maintenance in habitat sensitive areas to ensure that this work will not disturb hedgehogs in the cemetery.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart, you're allowed 1 supplementary question. Do you have a supplementary question?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. The remaining public questions are from Ms Robin Banks, Ms Jan Lever and Ms Catherine Hayes. As they all cover the same subject, I will ask you each to read your question and Councillor Jones will give one response covering all points raised. Ms Banks, would you please ask your question?
If the council is not going to run a winter shelter, what are the unhoused members of the community to do? I'll also note that the other two people aren't here. Do you just want me to ask their questions as well?
That's very kind of you. I'll do that and close that circle, but thank you. As we hear, Ms Lever and Ms Hayes are unable to attend, so I'll read out both of their questions. So the question from Ms Lever: I understand that Norwich City Council will not be providing extra winter shelter for homeless people this year. Why is this, and where should homeless people go in Norwich during extremely cold weather? And the question from Ms Hayes: what measures are being taken to prepare for the cold weather provision of new, appropriate and supported accommodation for vulnerable people in Norwich over these life-threatening dark and cold nights? Thank you, and I'll now call upon Councillor Jones to give you a reply.
Thank you. Please be assured that this council takes this issue very seriously and provides significant resources to support those who are experiencing rough sleeping. Year-round, our focus is on helping homeless people off the streets and into long-term sustainable accommodation. Norwich has 547 hostel beds, which we regularly see vacancies within, and working with our partners, we are constantly supporting rough sleepers into these services, regardless of weather. Over the past few years, the council has provided a winter night shelter for entrenched rough sleepers that organisations had made contact with through outreach work. Due to the complexities associated with this group, these beds were not well utilised, despite the best efforts of our rough sleeper team and partners. This meant that the majority of the nights the winter night shelter was significantly underoccupied. Public Health and the MHCLG guidance recommends that local authorities shift focus away from the use of night shelter accommodation. This is due to communal sleeping arrangements increasing the risk of spread of infections, infectious diseases, and people experiencing homelessness are likely to have underlying health needs and may be more vulnerable to infection. In light of this and of the historical underuse of the winter night shelter, this year we have changed our approach. Utilising self-contained accommodation within our existing hostel system, with flexibility to increase provision if necessary, is the preferred approach of people experiencing homelessness. It allows for greater engagement and more personalised support, and appears to be more successful in achieving long-term outcomes for people. This approach is our key focus in terms of provision during cold weather. It's important to note that we dedicate significant resource to support rough sleepers into accommodation all year. Additionally, during periods of cold weather, the Council activates its severe weather emergency provision, known as SWEP, the primary purpose of which is to provide emergency shelter during severe weather. SWEP is emergency accommodation for anyone, including people who have no right to claim benefits or housing in the UK, or have previously been refused offers of accommodation and support. This year, we have also changed our definition of severe weather. The updated definition aligns with Homeless Link best practice and includes a common sense approach to the trigger of SWEP activation, takes into account weather warnings, near freezing temperatures, snow and wind chill. During periods of cold weather, SWEP will be activated and accommodation will be provided to ensure that everyone has access to a warm and safe place to stay. Through this means, we are able to ensure that no rough sleeper needs to be on the streets during periods of extreme weather this winter.
Thank you. Ms Banks, do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah, thank you for your response. So I serve and run one of the soup kitchens that meet outside this hall. Some of them are outside now in the freezing temperatures, providing food because the council doesn't. So my question ultimately is would you come down and actually meet the people there that do require the help? Because those are the people that are falling through what I would describe as the massive holes in your safety net. And also, would you publicly share your homelessness strategy if there is one?
Councillor Jones.
I'd say I've actually worked in homeless services, so I'm well aware of the problems faced. It's a group I work with in my day job as well. So I don't see them. I think I would prefer to work with the agencies I've got and I do spend time with Pathways where I meet rough sleepers, so I think I have opportunities to meet those people on a regular basis.
Thank you. We've had no petitions. We now move on to the minutes. I call upon Councillor Stannard to move the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on 24th September 2024 and the extraordinary meeting held on 15th October 2024.
Yeah, formally propose, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Galvin to second the minutes.
Seconded.
Thank you. We now move to the vote. All those in favour, please indicate. It's unanimous. Thank you. That's carried. We now move on to item 6, which is questions to Cabinet members. There are 25 questions from members of the Council to Cabinet members, of which notice has been given in accordance with provisions of Part 3 of the Constitution. A copy will be available on the Council's website. Actually, they already are on the Council's website. Members who have asked questions are permitted to put a supplementary question to the Cabinet member. Question 1, Councillor Champion, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I do. I appreciate the response. It's the longest response I've had to any one of my council questions in this chamber. As you pointed out, that the data is 2 years old, at which time the council only gave 0.2% of its fly tipping, only gave 0.2% of its fly tipping incidents a fine. And I acknowledge, as you pointed out, that we are not at the bottom, but would highlight that we are at the bottom with other authorities in relation to taking action on fly tipping. My question is, in the last 2 years, there have been around 11,000 fly tipping reports. So does 0.1% being fined, and this time, represent an acceptable increase or decrease in relation to fly tipping?
Councillor Hampton.
Thank you for both your questions, Councillor Champion. I was doing my best to jot down the numbers you just mentioned there, and given some of the confusion with the data set originally, I think we're going to have to go away and compare numbers to get a full answer. However, my original answer does pick it up, but we are committed to enforcing and implementing fines whenever we can. It's not always going to be the most appropriate way to deal with fly tipping, depending on the nature of the incident, who's doing it, and this already outlines the government guidance, the national guidance, which we abide by. Sometimes it will be better to do engagement. The DEFRA data set you mentioned also contains statistics for enforcement actions generally, which include letters, that sort of thing, which we do also pursue to try and prevent and deter future fly tipping. Because sometimes, yes, there are people who are doing this maliciously, who are dumping waste, business waste, that sort of thing, which we would want to really clamp down and fine. However, there are some people who think they're disposing of their waste responsibly, maybe by leaving it next to communal bins. So actually how we would want to tackle that sort of thing, we would want to do it by education. There's an onus on us to do things like improve our signage, sometimes improve the bin types. So yes, we will continue to monitor and increase enforcement, but at the same time, it's not necessarily the solution. Some of the councils, even quite high up the table, for starters, a large proportion of people aren't necessarily paying the fines, they're not doing their job to deter, and some of them, as you can see, issuing a large number of fines doesn't necessarily correlate to a reduced number of incidents or having a small number of incidents. So yes, but there's a bigger picture we have to look at here.
Thank you. Question 2, Councillor Catt, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Councillor Jones, for the answer, and I do hope that we start to see the improvements on the ground. I'm sure that you will have seen the Housing Ombudsman's landlord performance report for 2023 to 24, and it did show that maladministration findings have risen 5-fold. In the last year, compensation ordered from the Ombudsman has risen from 2,000 to over 11,000, and improvement orders have risen from 8 to 55. As recommended by the Ombudsman, will you be referring this issue to the Scrutiny Committee?
Councillor Jones.
At the moment, we're going through the report in more detail, and I've got further discussions that I want to have on that first.
Question 3, Councillor Schmierer, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Councillor Hampton, for your response. In terms of fly tipping, I think it is clear that the current situation isn't acceptable, with neighbourhoods across the city blighted by it. So a new approach is clearly needed, and Scrutiny has come up with some useful ideas that you reference in your response. My supplementary question, therefore, is when can we expect a change of approach to happen, please?
Councillor Hampton.
The scrutiny recommendations, there was quite a number of them. I've responded to them in full at Cabinet, and that's available obviously on the Council's website. Those recommendations all have different timelines, different resource implications, things we can commit to fairly immediately, things we can't until the financial situation improves further. Any incident of fly tipping is unacceptable, and over the course of the last couple of years, the introduction and implementation of our Love Norwich campaign has already seen a change in approach. We've now got obviously the 6 CCTV cameras up to deter incidents and help us find out who has been doing the fly tipping. We've been issuing fines on that basis and hope to do more as we continue to analyse that data, which we're in the process of. So our approach has changed. We have put more resource in, and we will continue to look at what the Scrutiny Committee have recommended, other best practice and other things we can do within our means currently. Some of the things that have been suggested in your question and in Scrutiny, we completely accept that in an ideal world, yes, we'd offer everyone free collections, but we have to be realistic about the resource that would take and the reality of doing that at the present time.
Thank you. Question 4. Councillor Kane, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you. Sorry. So firstly, thank you. I really appreciate your answer, and also the fact that the data is going to be taken into account where future decisions were made. I'm just personally struggling with how the CCTV camera on Bowers Avenue will be able to give any info on who may or may not be fly tipping on Leafy Road, although they're close, and I wondered whether you could expand on how this might be the case.
Councillor Hampton.
Thank you. I think that's not strictly what this answer says. It says it will help to. Maybe this is unclear wording, but when I say it could could help deter fly tipping at this hotspot, I meant Bowers Avenue. I mean in the nearby area, if vehicles are used elsewhere in that area, kind of in the proximity of that camera where they pass it, and we may be able to get number plate information of it kind of en route, if that makes a bit more sense. So I was more trying to demonstrate our commitment in that area, that there is already some resource in that community, though as the first half of my answer hopefully acknowledges, we will certainly be reviewing data, as hopefully it does change, because where we have put CCTV cameras in, they may become not hotspots, and we'll have to keep reviewing that, but nonetheless, what I intended to get across is that we are doing some work, we will reassess where there is need.
Thank you. Question 5, Councillor Hookner, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Kendrick, for your response to my question. You might have seen recent evidence coming out of South Cambridgeshire District Council that has shown that trialling a 4-day week has not damaged performance and likely saved some £333,000 that would otherwise likely have been spent on interim pay. This council unanimously voted in favour of exploring the possibility of trialling a 4-day week here at Norwich City Council over a year ago. In light of the ongoing recruitment challenges that we've also heard about earlier, will you commit to acting on this resolution as a matter of urgency and seriously explore a reduced working week at full pay?
Thank you very much, Councillor. Well, obviously the Council continues to evaluate the proceedings at South Cambridgeshire District Council. I think it's still early days to see the full impact. And obviously we will act accordingly. But of course we must remember that council taxpayers who pay for this authority, most of them have to work 5 days a week. And obviously they would be disappointed, I think, if there was a reduction in the level of service that they received.
Thank you. Question 6, Councillor Calvert, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I do. In my question, I cited that in 22-23, 17% of the wage bill was spent on interim staff, and that was on the basis of figures that this council had released into the public domain as a result of an FOI released to the 4-day week campaign. Now that seems to have been corrected from 17% to just under 10%. Can reassurance be given that we can trust the figures this council produces in this area? Thank you.
As the Lord Mayor, as Deputy Lord Mayor, as the figures say, the for clarification, the financial year 22-23 interim and agency spend represented 9.88% of the total wage bill, and as far as I'm aware, that is correct. I think Chief Executive made a statement a little earlier on in which we stated how we were beginning to reduce the number of interims, but of course this is a factor that is affecting the whole of the local government sector throughout the country, and at the end of the day we obviously are not going to be immune to that.
Thank you. Question 7, Councillor Galvin, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor, I do. Thank you for the answer, Councillor Kendrick. So just referring back again to that quite unusual statement at the beginning of the meeting, which reaffirmed that Norwich City Council is a great place to work. But with so many people leaving and with only a quarter returning exit questionnaires, and 1 in 6 doing exit interviews, very low numbers. How do we know what they think of the council? And will you commit to finding out as a matter of urgency?
Thank you very much. Well, I actually agree with Chief Executive. I think that Norwich City Council is a good employer, but obviously even with the best employers there will be a level of turnover. We're not our slaves that we can sort of keep in perpetuity here. At the end of the day, there'll be many good officers who will wish to move on to other local authorities, for example, for reasons of seeking promotion and the rest. As to the exit interviews, well, exit questionnaires, well, obviously the problem is the people are leaving us who can't take any disciplinary action as they've actually left our employment. So obviously one would like to see a greater number of responses, but at the end of the day that is up to the individuals concerned.
Question 8, Councillor Bolton, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Sorry, thank you for your response. I hope the Council continues to look forward toward the other much harder 50% carbon reductions required, instead of riding on the coattails of previous reductions spearheaded by grid decarbonisation and not Council action. Buildings and heating is the largest part of emissions within Norwich. What is the plan, beyond a single statement in the strategy, to specifically support heat pump uptake in domestic non-HRA properties?
Councillor Hampton.
Thank you for your question. I want to be clear, we are looking forward. As my original answer notes, we're putting in substantial work to the new climate responsive Norwich programme, which you obviously have seen the outline of as it came through the climate panel. So we could agree it goes to expert consultation, which it has done, including with bodies like the Climate Commission who've been involved from early on. With regards to a single line statement, I'm not quite sure what that's referring to, so it's a bit hard to answer in that respect. But again, I'd like to make the point, we are building comprehensive strategies for not just the council's own operations, citywide adaptation, lots of different streams. So a comprehensive response will be put together, and it will include, as you say, buildings and heating as one of the absolute kind of priorities of what we have to tackle to get to citywide net zero by 2045.
Question 9, Councillor Osborne, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you. Yes, I do. I'm pleased to see that there's ambition to scale up installation of heat pumps. The 500 a year won't quite get us to where we need to be, but I hope it'll be near enough. But you're saying that we're going to be installing 500 new electrified heating systems from next year. That's 2 months away, less than 2 months away. At the moment, we're at about a tenth of that, so we're going to need a tenfold increase within 2 months, or 12 months if you take the next year. How confident are you that that will be delivered, and do you know where those heat pumps are going to go?
Councillor Jones.
I can give you more detail in writing, but as a sort of some sort of key points would be, we've got a process going on for a new main contractor for major works, which is going to support in being able to deliver things like this. And one of the big factors that we were put into at the market engagement event was the importance of people having the skill set and commitment to addressing these kind of solutions when we were looking for those contractors. So that was really important. Also, that we've now got the stock condition survey results, so then that helps us in understanding the property and the work that will need to be done so that it's the most appropriate heating solution going into that property. So I think we've got a lot of steps that have been taken recently that are moving us towards being in that delivery point. But I'll be able to, there's an awful lot going on at the moment around that, so I'll give you more details as those come forward.
Thank you. Question 10, Councillor Fox, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Deputy Lord Mayor. Thank you for your answer, Councillor Hampton. I wanted to ask, what are you doing to take social deprivation into account and find out the age range of children who would want to use the spaces in the criteria for designing and allocating funds for play areas?
Councillor Hampton.
Thank you for your question. These are considerations when, as the answer reflects, we have a pipeline of play areas which are going to be subject to improvements. These are subject to consultation, obviously Get Talking Norwich, as well as typically outreach at those areas and in those communities. We have a spread of areas across the city, with more or less every community having some kind of good access to a playground, including obviously many in areas of deprivation. And as for the age of the users of the equipment, as your original question reflects, not every play area has the capacity to make provision for all ages, from toddlers, as the one at Music House Lane, up to the kind of slightly bigger, more extensive equipment you'd need for older children. The reality is that's not going to be possible, but again, because there is a spread across the city, there is often another facility, a stone's throw away in this case, Argyle Street, which is what, a 10-minute walk or similar. So we can't have everything everywhere, but we will do our best to make sure everyone can access some kind of decent provision.
Question 11, Councillor Young, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, thank you.
You do?
Oh, sorry, did I? Yes, I do. Sorry, I've got a croaky voice.
You want to answer it? Ask it then.
As some houses are planned to be built in areas deemed to have some risk of flooding, this risk being calculated using historical data, which is rapidly becoming outdated as we are entering a new climate, a time when areas in Europe have seen a year's worth of rainfall in just one day. Could we please be provided with a detailed flood mitigation plan that will reassure us that people in need of homes in Norwich will be prepared to buy homes on this land despite the risk, and that their purchases will be long-lasting, sustainable and insurable?
Thank you for that. Councillor Stonnard.
Yeah, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding here about the nature of the master plan, where we are in the planning process, and what will happen next. So the first thing is that the master plan for East Norwich, it's an outline, high-level master plan. It's a guidance document, and it currently only proposes building on the fringes of the floodplain, not actually on the floodplain, on Maygurney and Deal Ground sites. Plans now and in the future will not include any building on the actual functional floodplain as currently designated by the Environment Agency. The allocation of this land for building went through a lengthy public inquiry, and the inspector was satisfied with the proposals which have been incorporated into the recently adopted local plan, which you will recall being agreed. Any proposals can only be based on the policies in place at that time, locally and nationally, and would need the support of the Environment Agency. Any specific proposals for building will, in due course, require planning permission. They will need to meet the requirements of the Environment Agency, which will be a consultee, and will make its decision on the basis of the information available to it at that time. And the decisions would be made locally by Planning Applications Committee, and as I say, following consultation also with the general public. So I think there are many, many safeguards in there to ensure that any housing which is built on the East Norwich site will be safe from flooding.
Thank you. Question 12, Councillor Lubbock, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Deputy Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Stollard, for the answer. I still strongly believe that there should have been so much more natural vegetation and porous surfacing. This should have been a great opportunity to embed the principles of what we are now calling a spongy city, an opportunity which has been lost. Do you agree that there should be a thorough investigation to look at all aspects of the bid, the design, the execution of the work, and why the extra costs were incurred?
No, I don't. I think, as you'll see, that we've increased the amount of green space there, and we've taken measures to ensure recycling of materials that were used, and it's been built in accordance with the plans which we agreed. So I really don't see there's anything that we would need to investigate.
Thank you. Question 13, Councillor Oliver, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Giles, for your response, and I'm really pleased to see that you'd support some consideration of member champions. I think I might have miscommunicated when I was speaking about a working group of members and officers. I meant about building on the task and finish group, so to have a regular standing committee of members and officers, and I wonder if that's something that could be considered during the ongoing work.
Councillor Giles.
Sorry, my mic wasn't working. Well, I've set out in my response that I think we should explore, electing member champions at the council AGM from the start of the next civic year, and I suppose, that there would be a role for them alongside the executive to liaise with the Unison branch and the relevant liberation officers from that branch in relation to EDI matters and working together collaboratively to achieve these aims for the council.
Thank you. Question 14, Councillor Harper, do you have a supplementary question?
I don't.
Thank you. Question 15, Councillor Huntley, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you. Yes, I do. Some very positive improvements have been made within Wensum Park, including greater accessibility, increased biodiversity and the upgraded children's play equipment. The toilet block was also identified as something to be refurbished. Is there any update on when this work will be undertaken, please?
Councillor Hampton.
Thank you very much for your councillors' questions, Councillor Huntley, and I also welcome the improvements that have been made so far at Wensum Park. So tenders were received for the toilet blocks at Wensum Park as well as Hyam Park, but these were actually substantially more costly than was anticipated, so it's decided in the first instance to progress with the Hyam Park toilet upgrade due to the higher usage here, particularly among cohorts like adults with children. The remaining budget will be spent on improving Wensum Park toilets, and we're assessing what's left after the Hyam project. Some variations, but we're anticipating this to be in the region of about £25,000, which will go towards repainting the toilets, signage, other cosmetic improvements. But as we develop our bid for the National Lottery Heritage Fund, this will include a proposal for major investment in Wensum Park, obviously subject to a successful outcome of this bid, which is to be determined. And the toilets at Wensum Park could be incorporated into, for example, a new cafe, or otherwise will be refurbished more properly under that programme.
Thank you. Question 16, Councillor Smith, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. No, I do not have a supplementary, but thanks to Councillor Hampton for a reply.
Thank you. Question 17, Councillor Maguire, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Deputy Lord Mayor. Thank you very much for such a full answer. And I'm just wondering, in connection with this, I've heard that, and this is incredible, that the Rebs and Ben's team have actually received a letter of commendation from the DWP praising their performance. Any of us who've had anything to do with DWP know that a nice letter is as rare as hen's teeth. So well done. But can the Cabinet Member please comment further on this letter of commendation and praise?
Thank you. Councillor Giles.
Thank you, Councillor Maguire. I'd like to congratulate our hard-working staff in Revenues and Benefits for receipt of this letter from the DWP, praising our performance in the administration of benefits. As Kevin alluded to, it is unusual to receive such a letter of praise and is testament to the hard work of our staff in the service area. The letter specifically praised our speed of processing housing benefit new claims. Efficient processing of new claims is key to ensuring those entitled receive payments towards their rent as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 18, Councillor Mike Sands, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. No, I don't have a supplementary. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 19, Councillor Carrington, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Yes, I do. Thank you, Councillor Giles, for your response. Parts of Canton Grove, which I represent, experience significant levels of poverty. Can the Cabinet Member comment on how, when assessing policies compliance with the socio-economic duty, we will ensure resources are targeted at those areas with greatest need?
Thank you. Councillor Giles.
Thank you, Councillor Carrington. The City Council works in partnership with the Norfolk Office of Data and Analytics to ensure that our place-based interventions to combat socio-economic disadvantage are targeted at those areas in the greatest need. We are currently in the process of reconfiguring our reducing inequality target areas, known as RETAs, on LSOA, lower super output areas, to ensure that smaller pockets of significant deprivation are not disadvantaged when allocating resources by being located within a more prosperous surrounding area. The adoption of the socio-economic duty will ensure that we place the same weight on socio-economic disadvantage when assessing policies for equality compliance as we do for the current legally protected characteristics in the Equality Act. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 20, Councillor Driver, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I have, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Giles. This is great news, especially for area Leighton. It was fantastic to see our Health and Home Improvement team in shortlist for the presented Disabled Facilities Grants Adaptation Service of the Year at the 1924 National Health Housing Awards. Could the Council Cabinet Member comment on this, please?
Councillor Giles.
Thank you, Councillor Driver. It was excellent to hear our Health and Housing Improvement team have been shortlisted for this prestigious award. This shortlisting recognises our team's dedication to ensuring residents live independently, safely and with dignity in their own homes. The awards, organised by foundations, highlight exceptional efforts in adapting homes to meet the health and wellbeing needs of local communities. Last year, the service administered and delivered 650 grants, 479 of which were DFGs, Disabled Facilities Grants for non-tenants, awarding over £3.5 million in grants, with each grant averaging £5,940. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 21, Councillor Fulton McAllister, do you have a supplementary question?
No, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Question 22, Councillor Padder, do you have a supplementary question?
No, I don't, thank you.
Thank you. Question 23, Councillor Sue Sands, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'd like to say thank you to Councillor Giles for his response, and I'd also like to remark, as someone who has benefited from cancer rehabilitation, I can recommend this excellent programme, but I don't have a supplementary. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 24, Councillor Ackroyd, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, I do. Thank you, Councillor Jones, for your answer, and it's good to read the plan, but sometimes it does fall through, and I've been informed recently about 2 refits in sheltered accommodation, which were completed once the tenant had moved in. And I wondered if there are any extra measures that could be taken to ensure that this doesn't happen to more vulnerable people in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. If you're able to provide me with those after the meeting, that'd be really helpful. And then to understand what might have gone wrong in that process is a really good way to evaluate that. And we're always keen to find ways to do it better. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've managed to get through those questions in less than 30 minutes. So question 25, Councillor Herkner, do you have a supplementary question for your second question?
I do, thank you very much, unexpected. I was surprised to see this land on the desk of Councillor Jones, but thank you very much for your response. It was a question about the time frame between the public being able to submit questions on cabinet papers and these cabinet papers being published. So it's basically a question, maybe for the monitoring officer or for anybody on the constitutional review panel. Can we make sure that going forward, deadlines for the public to submit questions on cabinet papers are not before the papers are actually published, so that there can be meaningful engagement of the public with these papers?
Thank you. Councillor Jones?
It's not my portfolio area, I'm afraid, so yeah, not much more I can add on that.
But I think people have heard. I think that's the key thing. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So item 7 now, we've got reports back from Cabinet. Can I ask Councillor Jones to provide an update to Council on the motion that was referred to Cabinet at the last meeting? There will be no discussions or questions on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. So this was discussed at the October Cabinet meeting and record of that discussion is in the minutes.
Okay, thank you. Move on to item 8, recommendation from the Independent Remuneration Panel. I call upon Councillor Kendrick to move item 8.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. The Independent Remuneration Panel has recommended that councillors' allowances should be increased by 3.29%. This is in line with the pay award for staff, and I think this is the usual mechanism throughout the country now in determining cost of living increases in councillors' allowances. Now, I am personally a very strongly believer in the need for councillors' allowances. When I was first elected, and it's way back in 1987, Councillor Stannard and myself would have been, even at our age, would have been seen as the babies of the house. It really, because obviously there wasn't the option for people who actually worked a working age. It was nearly completely those of, shall we say, an older generation who served as councillors. Now, there's nothing wrong in that, in one sense. Now, I think older people should be represented. But I'd perhaps prefer the situation we have now is a much more diverse age group, and that's only possible because of the very modest allowances we pay to councillors, which I think we should all accept and approve this recommended increase. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Stannard to second the item.
Formally second, Lord Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. I'm now going to invite group spokespersons. Councillor Calvert of the Green Group, would you have 5 minutes?
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that we're in broad agreement, actually. Democratic oversight of this council is vital to ensuring that the residents of the city receive quality of service that they rightfully expect, and that their council tax is efficiently and wisely spent. To do this, we need to attract the very best of new councillors at each election. Councillors who have the abilities to make complex decisions, communicate with residents and lead their communities. Councillors who are representative of the people of Norwich as a whole. The most recent census of local councillors revealed that 48% of councillors in this part of the country, the east of England, were retired. 37% of councillors were self-employed, and just 29% were in employment. 60% of councillors are over the age of 60 years old, and just 8% under 40. Just 1/3 of councillors identify as female. Here in Norwich, we do better, you'll be pleased to hear. Why are we, as councillors generally, so unrepresentative of the people we seek to help? Let me tell you. The average councillor works 20 hours a week, according to the Local Government Association, to represent their residents and guide their council. To do their job well, councillors must make sacrifices with their time elsewhere, whether that's less times with friends, family, whether it's a loss of leisure time, or whether it's turning down work. It is a sacrifice that many councillors, many in the city, will be grateful for. But
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis on behalf of the Independent Group.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Councillor Ackroyd has pretty much said what I was going to say. I do think there may be a way of making this fairer in the future, though. A member of audit, for example, is paid the same as a member of planning, and there are vastly different amounts of meetings over the year. And I do think we should look at making a fairer system based on attendance of committee meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other member wish to speak? No. In which case, Councillor Kendrick, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much. Well, I very much welcome the representations from the other group. I do agree with Councillor Calvert. There is still, certainly on a national basis, there is more room to achieve in terms of having a more diverse group of councillors. Although, as I say, compared to 40 years ago, even the national figures you read out there would have been even worse in terms of lack of age diversity than there is today in the 2020s, and I think that is because there is now at least a very modest recognition to councillors for the time that they actually put in. I mean, in many ways, it's, I'm sure, probably below the minimum wage, but at least it is something.
Thank you. We'll now move to the vote. All those in favour, please indicate. That's unanimous, and I confirm it's carried. Thank you. Right, we now move on to item 9, adjustments to the capital programme 2024 to 2029. Before I ask Councillor Kendrick to move the item, I need to ask, do any members wish to speak on the exempt item? If so, we will move into a closed session before we move to the vote on this item. So is anyone likely to want to reference the exempt appendix? No? Thank you very much. I call upon Councillor Kendrick to move item 9.
Thank you very much. As we are not going to deal with the exempt items, I will be brief. Obviously, the reason why I'm introducing this report is because there's a financial move within the capital budgets. I'm obviously not the particular portfolio holder responsible for these particular items. Very glad to see, though, that the improvements to be made in Bothorpe, and I'm sure that's shared with the Bothorpe councillors who are present here. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Kendrick to second the item. Stannard. Who do I say? Kendrick.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Formally second, reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. I invite group spokespersons. Councillor Hoekner.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'd like to start by thanking officers for the hard work that goes into ensuring that our capital programme is up to date and reflects the realities of expenditure as accurately as possible. Making sure that Norwich is a city where people can easily get around on foot should be a priority for the council, and so upgrading the riverside path at Bothorpe Southern Park to repair flood damage and to make it flood resistant going forward is of course an urgent and important endeavour, especially given that extreme weather events will become more frequent as climate breakdown unfolds. So I'm glad to see that money is being made available to repair this path as soon as possible. Regarding the recommended reductions to the general fund budgets and HRA budgets, I understand that in the larger scheme of things, these are minor reductions. However, I think council tenants who have been waiting for years for urgent repairs to their council flat might legitimately wonder why budgets are being reduced rather than repurposed to tackle as many outstanding issues as possible within this budget cycle. These issues notwithstanding, I'm happy to support this paper overall. However, the background papers to the report we'll be voting on, notably the Q2 budget monitoring report, raises some worrisome questions I'd like to briefly flag. First of all, the report highlights recruitment challenges for key staff that we've also heard about earlier, and pressures arising from interim pay. What assurances can Cabinet provide that this will be brought under control ASAP? The report mentions a vacancy management panel that we've also heard about before. What will this panel do to make an effective difference? What's the time frame? When will it come into existence? And will we consider trialling a 4-day week, as we unanimously agreed we would do just over a year ago, but seem to have forgotten since. Secondly, the report highlights that income from car parking has been quite dramatically overestimated, leading to an estimated shortfall of nearly £750,000. This raises questions about the soundness of the method used for estimating this income in the first place, but it also raises worrying questions about the vision for our city underpinning this estimate. Additional parked cars generating an additional £750,000 worth of fees. That sounds like the antithesis of a future-proof climate responsive Norwich. Are we doing everything we can do to reduce our reliance on income from car parking, which is not only problematic from a climate and environmental standpoint, but also evidently pretty fickle? Thirdly, and to end on a happy note, it is excellent news that a growing share of our investments is being placed in money market funds committed to positive environmental, social and governance outcomes, and that the performance of these investments exceeds expectations. Going forward, I hope budget monitoring reports can provide councillors and members of the public with information on the percentage of our cash balances investments now placed in ESG funds to increase transparency and oversight in this important area. As we know, this is an area of major concern to many of our residents. Disappointingly, the Treasury Management Committee has just decided not to set up a task and finish group to look in greater depth into the ethical and sustainable management of cash balances investments. So I hope that we can at least have a bit more transparency via the reports going forward. Again, thanks to the officers for all the hard work that has gone into these papers, and I'll be voting in favour. Thank you.
And thank you for that. Before I call on Councillor Davis, just a reminder to members, although there is a background report linked into this, we are considering the specific items in the report only as far as the voting is concerned today. Councillor Davis, would you like to give your response, please?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I just have one question from the background papers, which is directly concerning this report. I just would like to know which part of the development pipeline projects the underspend relates to, please.
Thank you. Do any other members wish to speak? No? Councillor Stannard, you reserved your right to speak. Would you like to say anything?
No, I'm content to move on.
You. In which case, Councillor Kendrick, would you like to respond, please?
Yes, very briefly. In response to the spokesman from the Green Party, I don't think it's particularly relevant to the item we have here because this is to do with the adjustments to the capital programme. As to Councillor Davis's remarks, I would perhaps ask the officers perhaps to respond to her. I don't know the information offhand.
So that response will come after the meeting. Thank you. We'll now move to the vote then. All those in favour, please indicate. That is unanimous. That's unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. We're now on to the first of three motions. 10A motion leading on regeneration and social housing. I call upon Councillor Osborne to move motion 10A. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you. I won't use all of that time, don't worry. Norwich has a proud history of social housing. I think we all agree on that and see it all around us. But that's under threat because of policies like right to buy, which I always think should be called forced to sell rather than right to buy. And the constraints on councils that prevent them building as much social housing as they or we might all like. At the same time, I think all councils will be aware of brownfield sites in their wards and around the city that have been left vacant and which could be developed for the kinds of housing that we'd like to see in our city. And this motion sets out the principles that I think, and I hope all councillors will agree, should be followed in our approach as a council to regeneration in Norwich. Firstly, providing as much social housing as possible. I was delighted when in 2020 the Cabinet agreed to make the Mile Cross depot site 100% social housing. I'm sure other councillors will share my concern that that seems to have been called into question, at least in response to recent questions around that. That commitment hasn't been as evident. So I'd like to see a reaffirmation of that commitment to 100% social housing at the Mile Cross depot site, and indeed to other council-owned sites where we can bring forward development. With over 4,000 people on the council housing waiting list, I think we need every council house we can get. And that development of council housing should also include CPOs, compulsory purchase orders. There's quite a lot of abandoned stalled sites. There's one on Drayton Road at Limekiln News. There's one on Fishergate at Bridge Court. I can name lots of them. I'm sure everyone will know sites which could be developed for housing, and I think that our approach to that needs to be focused on what is the best strategic benefits to the city. So rather than just looking at which ones are easiest to buy and to sell, which ones are actually going to be developed and provide the biggest benefit for the corporate plan aims of the city, including providing high quality housing, and particularly social housing. So that's the first principle. The second principle is that the councils should play a leading role in how development is done in the city. Representing the city centre, speaking for Mancroft councillors, we see a lot of developments that are inappropriate or in some cases arguably unsafe, and that don't build the kinds of housing that we need. Truly affordable housing, particularly 2 and 3 bedroom family housing, not the sort of conveyor belt of student housing that or student accommodation that we've seen in the city centre. And other councils will have other concerns in reflecting the concerns of their wards. Lion Homes, once it got over its early wobbles about 5 years ago, has and should be a vehicle for delivering that vision of the kinds of housing that we want to see. I am concerned that a number of the Lion Homes developments that were promised seem to have stalled. At least I've not seen any progress. So I'd like to see Cabinet explain why those developments have stalled and how the promised housing will be brought forward. That's the second principle. The third principle is an awareness of risk. Having just asked for more support for Lion Homes, I do have to hark back to 2019 when what was Norwich Regeneration Limited lost £6 million, in large part due to governance failures. I'm sure Councillor Stannard will comment on that. Good governance, including transparency and accountability, is absolutely essential, and specifically, I think councillors should be receiving assurance about how decisions around regeneration are being made, and who is involved in those decisions. So to sum up, this motion is essentially asking for assurance around those 3 principles: social housing, delivering as much of it as we can, including using CPOs where necessary. Secondly, ensuring that the council plays an active role in shaping the development that we want to see, and that should be done including through Lion Homes, and not leave Lion Homes sort of sitting there, not doing very much. And thirdly, the vital importance of good governance and transparency around decision making, including particularly transparency around who is involved in making decisions on development in the city.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Schmiro to second the motion.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. So over the years, Norwich, like much of the country, has experienced a housing crisis. House prices and private rental costs continue to soar, making it increasingly difficult for people on low or moderate incomes to find affordable, secure dwellings. In 2023, the average house price in Norwich was around £275,000, far beyond the reach of many. Meanwhile, social housing waiting lists in the city, as I understand it, are at an all-time high, with something like 3,000 households waiting for an affordable home. So it is clear we need to take immediate and decisive action to address this crisis, and a crisis it certainly is. One key solution is, of course, the expansion of social housing. Now, successive governments have failed to build enough homes. I think that is widely accepted, especially after the introduction of right to buy in the 1980s, which led to the sale of something like 2 million council homes across the UK. And while this scheme provided many with the chance to own their own home, the Thatcher governments and subsequent administrations' failure to replace the funding the councils lost through selling properties has left a devastating legacy that we can see around us today. Nationally, only 1 new social home has been built for every 5 sold under right to buy. And the result? What is the result? It is a severe shortage of affordable housing and the rise of unaffordable private rentals. And like elsewhere in the country, Norwich has been detrimentally affected by this. So what is the answer? Well, we need to be bold. As Councillor Osborne has said, Norwich has a proud history of providing social housing, and the City Council could and should actively use more compulsory purchase orders to acquire brownfield sites that are currently sitting unused. These sites, whether they are the big ones like the Norwich East site or Anglia Square, or the smaller ones that Councillor Osborne referenced, they are often neglected and derelict and are perfect for redevelopment into social housing through the vehicle of Lion Homes. By prioritising such developments, we can not only provide the much needed homes, but also regenerate forgotten parts of our city, creating more vibrant, sustainable communities. So, it is time for councils, with the support of central government, to take responsibility for housing the most vulnerable. We must demand investment in social housing and ensure that all Norwich residents have the right to a safe, affordable and secure home. This is not just a housing issue, it is an issue of social justice. So let's act now to literally build the future that Norwich deserves. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite group spokespersons. Councillor Stannard.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm pleased to respond to this motion on behalf of the Labour Group. This council has a long and proud history of delivering high quality social housing and of doing everything in its powers to retain that housing, even when there was great pressure from central government to sell off the stock and when other councils were divesting themselves of their social housing stock. The fact that we retain today one of the largest social housing stocks in the country, over 14,000 social homes, is the result of the hard work of successive Labour administrations over multiple decades and the efforts of local heroes, including Baroness Hollis of Hayham, who in the 1980s, as Labour leader of this council, fought the then Tory government through the courts to prevent the forced mass sale of our social housing stock. It's a shame that this motion fails to acknowledge that the only reason we retain the stock we have is because of the efforts and hard work of successive Labour administrations of this council. This administration has delivered award-winning social housing in the city. Goldsmith Street won the Sterling Prize for architecture, recognising not just the quality of the architecture, but the entire built environment. This is part of a long and proud history which continues to this day. The party opposite is very good at proposing motions, urging this and demanding that, but let's not forget that they are the opposition. They haven't been in power, and indeed the planning committee on occasions, they have blocked our attempts to use brownfield sites for development. It is this Labour administration which has the political will to continue to build social housing to the very highest standard. The new Labour government has promised it will support the building of social housing, and although it is early days in the life of this Parliament, I believe the benefits of having a Labour council working hand in hand with a Labour government to deliver big changes to the benefit of the citizens of this city will very quickly become very apparent. So, let me be clear. We are going to build more council homes in this city, and we do not need this motion to make that happen. We're doing it already, and we have more planned. As part of this, the regeneration of stored brownfield sites is already a high priority for this administration. We keep all brownfield sites under review and have a revolving fund of £25 million as part of the Towns deal, which enables us to compulsorily purchase stalled sites. And we have used it successfully, for example, at Windmill Court in my own ward. CPO is a lengthy and complex process with loopholes which landowners can exploit to draw out and delay the process. CPO as it stands is not the panacea for the problem of stalled brownfield sites. It is a tool we can use selectively and which, in the right circumstances, can be effective. So at this point, I'm beginning to wonder, what is the point of this motion? It asks us to review sites that could be subjected to CPO. We already do. It's not asking us to do anything new. It says council-led development should be a priority, but then asks us to acquire sites via CPO and sell them on quickly. So that's really confusing. Does it want council-led development or not? It also wants to have a clause requiring sites to be developed quickly. It's not entirely clear what effect such clauses would have on land values, but I am advised that the council can end up losing money on such deals to the detriment of the revolving fund, because such clauses being included could reduce the value of the land. On that same point, the revolving fund contains, as I've said, only £25 million, so it's not the solution to acquiring many stored brownfield sites in quick succession, and it certainly isn't enough to enable us to make any impression on big schemes like East Norwich. The motion talks about short-term lets, but it's not clear what it means by that. The 2020 Scrutiny Committee report, which it references, was about holiday lets and the impact on local hotels, which was found to be minor. But the relevance of that to this debate is entirely unclear. The motion also contains misleading information. It states that there are now questions over the delivery of 100% social housing, including at the former Mile Cross depot site. It's very easy for anyone to stand up and say there are questions about absolutely anything with absolutely no evidence whatsoever. We cannot endorse rumour and hearsay. What I can state quite clearly is that the Mile Cross site is designated for 100% social housing, and there is planning consent in place for phase 1, which will be 67 social homes. Line Homes are looking to begin the first phase on site in the spring of next year. They aren't sitting around being idle, as the proposers suggest. In short, we believe this motion is mostly asking us to do what we're already doing, and indeed have a long history of doing. However, there are also asks which make incorrect assumptions, for example, about the Council's ability to use CPO to make a significant impact on the issue.
Mr. Stoner, could you
I will. It also contains incorrect information, and therefore we cannot support it.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I think Councillor Lubbock was next, actually.
No, I spoke to Councillor Lubbock ahead of the meeting. So,
oh, okay, right. Thank you. I'm very pleased to hear that Mile Cross is going to be 100% social housing, because this has been a long-term commitment of the Council, agreed unanimously by the Labour Group, and there were 30 plus strong on the administration benches, and in item 6 at Cabinet on the 10th of June in 2020. Lion Homes doesn't only build high-quality sustainable social housing, it plays a vital role in building safe and welcoming communities. The company's own development through growth will provide long-term secure jobs, training opportunities and education for people in our city. Profits will be shared with the community by reinvestment in them and through enhanced council services. It really is the pride of Norwich, and if allowed to flourish, there remains the potential to reset the standard for the entire country. It's 5 long years since Goldsmith Street won the Sterling Prize, and we can't dine on that single achievement forever. This council has a duty to support Lion Homes to deliver our desperate social housing need, and a duty to Norwich to cultivate the social value that Lion Homes seeks to provide. It's therefore vital that new development sites are sought, secured and allocated for Lion Homes to develop, and the resources to achieve this aim are provided as a priority. With the proven social value and potential income for the council that Lion Homes can deliver, they must also be consulted to help lead on wider development opportunities. There is nothing to stop Lion Homes becoming the preeminent provider for all council developments, including existing and proposed partnerships. Where other prominent developers have cut and run, cruelly letting the city down in recent times, Lion Homes continues to do Norwich proud. We'll be voting in favour of this motion.
Thank you. Are there any other members who wish to speak on this item? Councillor Mike Sands, and then Councillor Lubbock next.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. It is good that at long last the Green Party has recognised the value of Lion Homes, which have done nothing but criticise the mere existence of before. The Green Party must be aware that previous Tory governments put in legislation that not only made it near impossible to build new council homes, but which kept 75% of the receipts, essentially stealing it from local authorities. The Greens seem to have only just discovered that Norwich City Council has been able to build social homes, and that the new Labour government has made a commitment to build new social homes. The Greens also seem to have forgotten how eutrophication is the reason that many developments, both social and private, by both social and private developers, have stalled. So I can't support a motion which basically states the obvious about things which we are already doing.
Thank you. Councillor Lubbock.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. There is much in this motion to support, but at the same time there are areas that we can't support, so we should abstain on this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other members wish to speak? Councillor Calvert.
I just want to take the opportunity, thank you Lord Mayor, to point out to Councillor Stonnard that planning ought to be non-political. Now if he's saying the Green Group is blocking things in planning, it rather leads to a misunderstanding about what planning is and does, one that leads to a dangerous misunderstanding, or perhaps it's an understanding that the Labour Group have about planning that everyone else does not.
Councillor Sands, you've already spoken once.
Sorry, Deputy Lord Mayor, but I take issue with some of the comments made by Councillor Calvert. I sit on planning, I'm Deputy Chair of Planning, have chaired planning in the past, and it is actually true that the Greens have obstructed the development of homes in the past, particularly homes for homeless people.
Thank you. Can we bear with me for 1 second while I just show you? We're just querying something. Is there something you need to respond? Just while we're clearing up a point, if any other members.
I believe that the item that Councillor Sands is referring to in Greens blocking homeless development was the one time that I abstained on a motion.
So what I would like there to be no discussion on who did or didn't vote in a particular way at a planning committee meeting. I'd like us to deal with the motion before us today. Thank you.
Well, if I may, you gave the gentleman across the chamber 2 opportunities to speak. There were leaflets which went out saying that as a Green member, I had taken action on this. I object strongly.
Any other members wish to speak on the motion? Yeah, I mean, if there's no other motions, then I'll call Councillor Osborne to respond.
Thanks. Yeah, I noticed one of the points that wasn't addressed in this motion was the points around who's involved in decision making and transparency and accountability. Obviously, there were concerns raised about governance and the way that the council makes decisions about who it works with, how those decisions are made in relation to development. I do just want to pick Councillor Stonard up. He said that Lion Homes would start work in spring on Mile Cross. I've just received assurance that that is not the case. When Councillor Davis submitted an amendment to this motion to ask about Mile Cross being 100% social housing, the response was that that amendment was not allowable because it is introducing a new topic, as Lion Homes is not the delivery vehicle for social housing at the Mile Cross depot site. So I'd like just to correct Councillor Stonard's response there. Sorry? I'm sure I'm right. Okay, well, I think this kind of illustrates my point that it's not necessarily clear who is making decisions on housing.
It's you who's making it unclear, Jamie, not me.
I've received assurance that Lion Homes is not going to be developing Mile Cross. And it concerns me that...
Councillor Driver, if you might. Councillor Osborne, would you finish your summation of the motion, please?
This kind of illustrates my point, that there's a lack of clarity about who makes decisions around development, who's carrying out development in the city, and what the transparency and governance is.
Could I have quiet over here, please? Do you have anything else to say in your summation?
I'd like to see a full governance report, is all I say. But yeah.
We'll now move to the vote. All those in favour, please indicate. Okay. All those against? Abstentions? Okay. So, by my reckoning, that is 14 in favour, 18 against, and 3 abstentions. So that motion has failed. Thank you. We now move on to 10B, debate not hate. An amendment has been received from Councillor Jones. As Councillor Jones is amending her own motion, this will become part of the substantive motion. I call upon Councillor Jones to move motion 10B as amended.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Democracy is an amazing thing, and we're privileged to have the opportunity to debate, discuss and persuade. The reality is that there are things we agree on and others we don't, and sometimes we might be able to change someone's point of view. How we do this matters. Reasoned and rational debate is key. Sadly, in recent years there seems to have been a shift. I can best describe it as the politics of Trump, where aggression has become part of the political arena and normal rules don't seem to apply. Best seen with the Capitol riots. Truth seems to have become somewhat flexible, and this and other standards of behaviour crumble. With the worst of it generally on social media, hidden behind a computer or phone, insults, threats and lies seem to have become acceptable currency, replacing true political debate. Holding an opposing view can lead to vilification rather than discussion. It has become very absolute for some, unable to accept any challenge or alternative to what they hold as true. Although this change in politics is most visible at an international and national scale, first both with the rise of Trump, but also when we look at cases like the senseless murder of Joe Cox, we see shades of this in the local level, in local government. There is a depersonalisation of politicians, that even at whatever level. Given the behaviour and language that seems to be becoming more commonplace, too many people have forgotten that as politicians we are people too, with lives beyond politics, emotions and vulnerabilities. We are not Teflon coated and insults do not bounce off. So given that they stopped seeing us as people, I've decided to make this personal. So Lord Mayor, forgive me if I take this time to reflect on experience from last year, where the importance of debate, not hate, became terrifyingly real for me. I believe this will illustrate how the lines become blurred, or quite frankly crossed, between what is acceptable or not. I'd like to take you back to a Wednesday morning, about a year ago, at 9 AM, and the first call. It was an unknown number, and on answering the number, a voice demanded, was this Beth Jones? Whilst a little confused by the tone, I responded yes, and tried to inquire who they were. They spoke over me, seeming to read from a script, demanding I intercede in a housing issue relating to a tenant. They concluded by giving me a deadline to comply and hung up. And the calls kept coming, the same script, the same demand, that I comply by a specified date, leaving this hanging with some implied consequence, which to be honest felt quite threatening. As soon as I could block a number, another called, or an unknown number, it was incessant, some seconds apart, sometimes 15-minute gap. By 3 PM there was 150 calls, all anonymous individuals refusing to give a name beyond the group they represented. The implied threat of a deadline hung in the air for me. I knew the case they were demanding I act on, and knew full well of what they asked was totally inappropriate of an elected member. To ensure fairness in housing allocation must be done by a clear set of rules, not influenced by politics. To interfere in such a process would totally compromise my integrity, which I of course was not prepared to do. But this left me painfully aware I had no ability to meet their demand, but no idea what the consequence would be. What I did know was what other branches of this group how they'd acted elsewhere, and if I'm honest, that left me quite scared. Next, they turned up at a cabinet meeting. Whilst public attendance is important, walking in, I was more than nervous and right to be concerned. Each time I began to present a report, one of them would start shouting the same demand, which became ingrained in my mind. The meeting would pause for them to be removed, and then I would start over and over. Spread round the room, never knowing what direction it would come from, I felt trapped. Anxious and scared, I wanted to leave, but unsure where they were, I was too afraid. The supportive messages of "you've got this" and "keep your head up" on Teams were all I could focus on. At this point, I should probably give a little context. You might be sitting there questioning my reaction now. But as I've already said, we are people with lives. In my case, a job where I had experienced workplace violence. The perpetrator jailed for trying to stab me with a 6-inch knife. So my perception of threat is heightened. And ironically, when I got that first call on that Wednesday morning, I was on a way for an appointment to support with resolving that issue. The icing on the cake came a few days later when a friend called me having concern seeing a stand in the city where people were being asked to vote on whether Beth Jones is dodgy and placards saying that I loved homelessness. Now, I've served with many of you for several terms and hope by now you know I take my responsibility seriously as a councillor and cabinet member. My integrity is core to me. Do you really think that's fair? Would you call me dodgy? What in my actions would lead you to think I love homelessness? I hope quite the opposite is true. I ask you to reflect on what it would feel like to hear that about yourself, all for not compromising your integrity and the integrity of a process that must be transparent and fair to all. These are what I'd call the main highlights, but they do give you a flavour of what was the hardest month of my life. I will always be grateful for the amazing support of friends, officers and colleagues. It would be easy to say that they did not intend to make me feel unsafe, they didn't know the background. My response to that is, regardless of your intentions, it's the outcome that is important. They'd stop seeing me as a person, and that is dangerous. So I guess their intention was to get me to comply or possibly resign. Yes, you terrified me at times. I'm not ashamed to admit this. I'm human. Yes, you even made me cry. I'm no robot. But I'm proud to say a year on, I kept my integrity and I'm still here. This cannot become common practice. We cannot replace civilised politics with this. If the norm becomes aggression, disregard of the truth and threats, then consider what calibre of elected members we will have, as I cannot believe anyone with empathy or humanity would want to stand. What future is that? Tonight I would ask you to condemn such behaviour and support a good form of politics and give your vote to true political debate. I would also ask you to always consider what you support and what you give your voice to. Thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Councillor Hampton to second the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and thank you very much to Councillor Jones for introducing the motion and sharing some of your experiences, which I know really can't have been an easy thing to revisit. I'm fortunate to an extent that I'm lucky I've not experienced as anything as sort of severe or prolonged as that, but in the 8 years or so that I've been a candidate and a councillor, I've still had pretty regular incidences of things like maybe at a lower level, but ageist or sexist comments, people, whether that's sort of residents, occasionally, campaigners being unnecessarily aggressive or purposely intimidating to try and get a certain outcome. Sometimes this is face-to-face, on the doorstep, in the community, and I think that is the most scary situations we find ourselves in, but nowadays, this is, as Beth reflects on, often online, news articles over email, on social media, where people have more of an opportunity to hide and ramp things up much quicker. Dealing with these sort of issues, it's not only important for our own personal safety and well-being as councillors, but it's vital to make sure everyone feels they can stand for election and serve, especially those from already underrepresented groups. The Debate Not Hate campaign provides recommendations and resources to help improve the support for local politicians, as well as seeking to tackle some of the root causes of this culture and behaviour, including by raising public awareness of the role of councillors and promoting healthy debate. And this is something I think there's a role for all of us members in the chamber to play on. With politicians, there is always going to be debate and discussion, both here in the building and on the campaign trail, but we have a responsibility to make sure that what we're saying, as far as we're aware, is not misleading, especially when it could heighten emotions or tensions on certain issues, and we also need to make every effort to attack the politics and not the person. And if campaign groups or similar are using tactics that blur or cross lines and are harassing or intimidating fellow councillors, we should be distancing ourselves, however much we might actually share some of their aims. It's not just down to us as individuals. There are things the council should be doing or considering to improve the support and response that they offer. I know Scrutiny have picked this up as a topic, and using the LGA Debate Not Hate toolkit, there's an opportunity there to assess what our policies and provisions are, and that will be a really valuable thing to do. I know fairly anecdotally when there have been incidents that the council response has been swift and decisive, but we just have to make sure we really are doing everything we can to best practice and proactively.
If you can just bring your remarks to a close, please.
I will. Thank you very much. So that paints a little bit of a bleak picture, which is a sort of necessity debating this. There are obviously so many good things about this role as well, working with colleagues, officers, getting to support residents, improve our local areas, but we shouldn't have to face intimidation, abuse and harassment to be able to do that. So I hope we can all support this motion tonight, and thank you.
Thank you. I now invite the group spokespersons. Councillor Kane, please, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I speak today as someone who has been targeted by the far right for harassment, abuse and intimidation. And I know that I'm not alone in this here. Councillors across this chamber have variously been targeted on and offline, with leaflets being put through people's doors targeting some individual councillors, harassment campaigns started online, and vile lies spread in YouTube videos in order to make councillors seem like a worthy target for abuse. Most recently, a list of councillors' names and addresses was shared by someone from the far right on a public Facebook group. The implication was clear: harass these people in their homes, where they should feel safest. In fact, if you haven't been targeted for abuse, you're one of a minority of councillors, both locally and nationally. According to an LGA survey, almost 75% of councillors have received abuse or intimidation, 22% have received a death threat or threat of violence, and 10% say someone has attended their home to intimidate them. This intimidation impacts women and minorities even more, with over 50% of women saying that they avoided campaigning alone in the May elections. And this has serious implications for our future representations. How many candidates may be put off from standing by this? How many women and minorities feel like the extra spotlight would be too much in an already increasingly hostile and scary world? And I know it was something that played on my mind before I decided to stand. There sadly seems to be little we can do about those who have already been radicalised to the far right or other hateful ideologies. So what can we do? Right now, we can support the LGA's recommendations, making sure that there are strong structures in place and that councillors have the support and material help they need under these circumstances. And we can lead by example, hold the exemplary standards talked about in this motion, and support each other alongside members of the public who come here to speak across the board, kindly, during our campaigns and within this chamber. I believe we all got into local politics to make our corner of the world better for the people who live in it. It seems apt to quote Joe Cox at this point: we have more in common with each other than that which divides us, all of us. We can all make sure that standing in a local election, whether for one of the three main parties that sit here or as an independent, is something a candidate should be eager and excited about, not fearful of. Standing was a stressful experience for me. I know I'm not the only one. It doesn't need to be that way, and we can work together to make sure that it isn't for anyone else. Now, none of this is to say that councillors should be reproach. Far from it. As the Joe Cox Commission recommends, all elected representatives, and especially those in leadership, should model good behaviour. We should all stand by the Nolan principles. We should all be subject to accountability, and we will, at times, respectfully, I hope, disagree with each other, without pulling faces or laughing or talking over each other. We were elected to serve communities, and our constituents have a right to hold us to account and to replace us should we not serve them. And it is important to recognise that robust debate and hate differ, and that everyone should have the right to peaceful, non-violent protest. But no one has the right to abuse and harass another person. No councillor should feel afraid of intimidation, and hopefully supporting this motion, the LGA's recommendation and upholding those exemplary standards will go a little way to changing this culture.
Thank you. Councillor Ackroyd to respond, please.
Thank you. In April this year, I was at a meeting here in City Hall when one of my fellow committee members came in, clearly shaken by a frightening and potentially dangerous encounter with a resident whilst out leafleting. We've all experienced unpleasant behaviour to a greater or lesser degree. We've already heard from Councillor Jones tonight. And I sometimes think that the rudeness we encounter on occasions when canvassing from those voting for another party bears no relation to the way the candidate would greet us. It's sometimes a total lack of understanding of how we work together, mostly in council. However, we can cope with individual rudeness, but it's when the situation is ramped up and we find ourselves targeted in the street, as happened to our colleague, or on social media, with physical threats and our details writ large, or in a meeting, that we must worry. And of course, for too many, this is becoming the norm. An LGA report notes, as we've already heard, that 22% of respondents in their survey stated that they had received death threats or threats of violence against them, while 7 out of 10 councillors reported experiencing abuse or intimidation. Women and people from minority backgrounds are more likely to experience heightened and more vitriolic abuse than others. This abuse will deter and is deterring people from standing for election or pushing them to step down early, impacting council's ability to achieve their ambitions of truly reflecting the communities they represent. We know that council officers are also increasingly subject to abuse and intimidation. We probably feel, I'm sure we feel, that far more unites us as local councillors than divides us. Whatever party runs a local authority, the problems faced by local government are the same. Too much demand, too little resources to meet that demand, and those who suffer most are the most vulnerable. We all know that democracy thrives on good discussion, but this should never turn into personal abuse. Decision-making should be open, transparent, and open to scrutiny. As citizens, we all have the right to have our voices heard if we're unhappy with decisions that are taken on our behalf, but abuse should not be tolerated. The LGA's continuing Debate Not Hate campaign aims, as we've heard, to raise public awareness of the role of councillors in their communities, encourage healthy debate, and improve support for local politicians facing abuse and intimidation. It's so important that the public can engage with local politicians and that politicians feel safe to engage with the public. We all have a part to play in maintaining and enhancing our democratic institutions at all levels, encouraging better behaviour and maybe some self-reflection are key to that process, as well as getting the message out there that abuse and threats against those elected to represent us are unacceptable. Otherwise, the risk is that people who simply want to make their communities a bit better get driven from the field, and that's never going to be good for our democracy or our politics. We fully support all aspects of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call upon Councillor Davis to speak.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. This is going to be quite a difficult thing for me to say. I have been targeted quite heavily in the past, but I feel I have to speak the truth in the chamber. I'm pleased to see this motion here tonight, and I look forward with renewed anticipation that my own complaint against a councillor in this chamber for slander, which they freely admitted to and in fact even bragged about to other councillors, may tonight finally be resolved. For over 18 months I have waited for Councillors Stonard and Maguire to sort this out, and this motion gives me new hope that hate against councillors in this chamber is finally being taken seriously by the Labour administration, and I look forward to a swift resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other members wish to speak? Councillor Mike Sands.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Over the past 5 or more years, I have been engaged in regular briefings with CTLP, Counter-Terrorism Local Profile. This covers extremist and terrorist activity across the whole region of Eastern Counties, from Bedfordshire across to Suffolk and, of course, Norfolk. While MPs have been targeted, notably through the murders of Joe Cox and David Ames, and it is not widely known that the murderer of David Ames crossed 5 constituencies to reach him in Southend. Protection of MPs has subsequently been enhanced. I have raised the issue of the safety of councillors, their activists and of officers who of course are very much public-facing figures. To this end, through CTLP, I raised questions about 3D, fully operational, near-military grade carbines in Belgium. Arrests in the eastern counties were subsequently made. I also informed CTLP of much more recent posts on Facebook publishing home addresses and phone numbers of serving and past councillors by an XRW, that's extreme right-wing group, for no good or sane reason. And these have been subject to investigation by police and the intelligence community. Online media such as Twitter and Facebook and some other less well-known media pages bear a great responsibility for the undermining and even threatening in public life of those in public-facing positions. Addressing this as an issue or a series of issues will in the long term provide encouragement for those who wish to continue to engage in public life. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sands. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I absolutely agree with what many colleagues have said about what happens outside of this chamber and in the community. And some of you will know that I was previously a councillor in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, serving for 8 years. Now, I think febrile is the F word I will settle on to describe politics in Tower Hamlets. Barely a day went by when there wasn't some brutal attack on your character, someone writing an anonymous post about you online or leaving you an abusive voicemail. And on one memorable occasion, a member of the public actually threw a full glass of water, glass and all, at one of my colleagues during a council meeting. Now, the sad thing is that wasn't particularly unusual for Tower Hamlets, and we just accepted it. And then one Friday morning, I found myself sitting in Limehouse Police Station, giving a statement to the police about a fellow councillor of a different party being subject to a hate crime by a member of the public in the council chamber. And after that began a long period of having to enter the town hall from the building opposite, using the underground car park, sometimes with a police presence, because it just wasn't deemed safe for us to walk in through the front door. And when I stood down in Tower Hamlets, I actually moved boroughs. That was the profound personal impact that it had on me. Now, I don't equate Norwich for 1 second with Tower Hamlets at its nadir, but I do say that it's a surprisingly rapid descent into chaos if you allow misinformation to go unchecked. Now, there are good people in all of the parties here and groups represented in this chamber. Of that, I have absolutely no doubt. People who work with others for the benefit of the city, and a special shout out to Councillors Calvert and Haynes, who just last week helped secure a reprieve on the start of planning committee for the frazzled parents amongst us. So I do believe it's the minority of councillors that need reminding of this, but reminding that we do have a responsibility to be honest, to be accurate, to be measured in our contributions to public debate, both here and out in the community. So, when you cynically suggest that this administration wants to sell off City Hall, when you paint a picture of the Lord Mayor's dais being replaced by a breakfast buffet of a budget chain hotel, when you know full well that the real plans discuss the potential for a hotel in the disused void at the back of City Hall, when you do that, you've got to own your part in the erosion of public trust. When you criticise the Cabinet Member for Housing for changing the winter shelter arrangements to save money when you were explicitly told at scrutiny that wasn't the case, it matters. When you write a column for the EDP accusing the leader of the council of corruption without a single shred of evidence, you're talking down not just this administration, but our whole city council. I don't ever want to be sat in Bethel Street Police Station having to give a statement because someone here was abused or assaulted either inside this chamber or outside it. As others have said, in an increasingly polarised world where we as progressive parties are actually aligned on so much, I think we can and must do better when it comes to the state of our discourse.
Thank you. Councillor Maguire.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I think it's really appropriate that this motion is here this evening and has so much support. And the Civility Commission, the Joe Cox Civility Commission, makes some really important points. And I want to bring out one. I say this day because I'm sure some of you are aware it's International Men's Day, and men are not somehow invulnerable to what goes on. And I'm sure I'm not the only man who's been threatened at the doorstep, always been wondering what's going to be at that door when it opens, always wondering why someone might be lurking. And it's interesting that the sad story we heard from Councillor Jones, when I also was cabinet member with homelessness in my portfolio, I was the subject of a campaign which went international for some reason. I was the devil incarnate simply because of the way that we managed and tried to solve the homelessness problem. It is not a respecter of gender, it's not a respecter of class or colour, creed. It's not a respecter of anyone. When somebody is focused on, when they are separated out for abuse, that's what happens. So I'm really pleased to be able to support this motion this evening, and I'm grateful for so many similar speeches in this.
Thank you. Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Well, I too would very much support this motion. Now, I say I've had experience of local government going back to the 1980s, and I'm not going to say it was some kind of halcyon period of peace and calm, because it certainly wasn't. I mean, there were attacks, certainly in the early 80s, on the harassment of Labour councillors by groups like militants, so it could be the far left as much as the far right. But actually, I do actually think overall there has been a deterioration over those 40 years. It is even worse now than it was in the 1980s, which often could be quite febrile itself. But now, I think because of social media now, I must admit the internet and social media have done a lot of good things, but I think that it has now led to a very much a polarised society, where in a sense people can now occupy their own little echo chambers, little echo chambers, where all they hear is their own voice, or their own side, spout on endless hate towards the opposition. At the end of the day, that leads to a febrile and disastrous position. And look where it can actually end up in. In the recent Mexican elections, no less than 100 political candidates were actually killed during those elections. So yes, it can get even worse than it is today. But it is, in my opinion, beginning to deteriorate both in Britain, Western Europe, and of course in the United States. And that is very much to be regretted. Now, I'm myself not a person who's easily intimidated. Indeed, I was once a debt collector. So you can understand what I mean. But at the end of the day, even I sometimes am concerned about what I see. It must be very difficult for us in terms of encouraging women, especially into politics, when they see so much, shall we say, negativity and nastiness and unpleasantness. You know, we've seen two MPs, as has already been mentioned, in the last 10 years, both being murdered, and you know that is the level to which things can descend. We cannot descend into the pit. We saw what happened in Germany in the Weimar Republic, and how the democracy there was crushed. We cannot allow that to occur in this country or any Western country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Stoddard.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to associate myself with Councillor Kane's comments about being attacked by the far right, because I too have been attacked by the far right. It was homophobic, it was a hate crime, I had to involve the police, and that sort of thing has happened more than once, so I completely understand. And so I think there is an issue not just of attracting women into politics and public life, that's really important, but actually minorities, people who truly reflect the population we seek to serve, and people who actually perhaps are more vulnerable than your average straight white man, I guess, and less privileged. So I think that's a really, really important point. I think as councillors, we must behave to the highest possible standards. I think that means being honest and accurate. And I know sometimes opposition members will, for political reasons, accuse me and others of not being honest and not being accurate. You know, there's a cut and thrust of politics, okay, but we need to stick to the facts. And the important thing is we talk about policy positions. It must not get personal. That's when it gets dangerous. And that line has been crossed on a number of occasions. So I think it's really, really important, because when individuals take to the media deliberately to misrepresent the actions or the statements of an individual, sometimes on some very sensitive issues which could have repercussions, I think they need to take a long, hard look at what they've done and what the repercussions of that could be in terms of the safety and well-being of their colleagues. I think it's unacceptable when that happens. So I think there's something we can all agree on. Actually, we must all be honest and accurate. We must treat one another like human beings. We must be very, very careful not to misrepresent one another. It is a dangerous world, as has been said. It's a slippery slope that we must not fall down.
Thank you. Councillor Champion.
This is a really important motion. It's and listening to Councillor Jones, I can really sympathise. And I would suggest that, you know, that I can empathise, because there was a leaflet put out about me by the Labour group saying that I was anti-homeless following an incident when I abstained in a planning committee, which, as been pointed out, should be non-political, and it was unacceptable. I had people coming up to me, sending me quite disturbing messages as a result of that. It's negative politics. We need to stick to the facts, and I've heard some fine words today, really fine words, and if those words correspond to reality, that would be amazing. Baseless comments can be dangerous. I've been accused of anti-Semitism, as I'm sure many of you have been aware. There's been no action taken by the police. The Jewish labour movement haven't gone any further, other than slander, other than saying things online. This almost resulted in me not standing again, because I felt so uncomfortable to be accused of racism. I moved to South Africa the year Nelson Mandela was released. I sat on the steps watching people vote for the first time. I understand racism. I've taken great efforts in my life to not allow myself to become what I do not want to be. And yet these mechanisms of negative politics, of hate, are used politically, and we must all rise above that. We can all be better. And I would suggest that we take this motion today, not just as fine words, but we act upon it. We don't allow ourselves to succumb to negative politics. We live in a democracy. There is more things that bring us together in this chamber than separate us. But there is a long history of negative politics in this chamber. And it's worrying, very worrying. I would suggest it's very easy to see when somebody, just as on social media, when somebody is opposing you, it's very easy to feel that you've got the upper hand and that you're in the moral superior position. But I would ask everyone in this chamber to reflect and take a moment to ensure that they don't succumb to the same issues and they become what they do not want to be.
Councillor Champion, your 3 minutes are up now.
Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. We've heard of grand acts of heroism from Councillor Sands, but to be honest, it's not about grand acts of heroism, working with the authorities to crush roving gangs. To be honest, it's about small acts of heroism. The small act of heroism is when you see a colleague, someone you like, someone you see regularly, acting in a way that they shouldn't. The small act of heroism is leaning over to them and asking them not to do that.
Does anyone else wish to speak at this point? Councillor Lubbock.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I feel I've been very humbled by what I've heard, the statements from councillors this evening. I've been very fortunate in the 30 years I've been a councillor. I've never been affected by abuse or intimidation. Rudeness is about the worst it's got from members of the public. So I feel we ought to go away from here and make some commitment to do something. And all I can say is that I am a member of the Standards Committee. We are meeting in a few weeks' time. Is there any way that the Standards Committee can have a look at this motion and take some sort of steps to make sure that the resolutions contained in it are although that's not the actual sort of purpose of the Standards Committee, but I think it ought to be aired at the Standards Committee, and I commit to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, just briefly, that was my hope with regards to suggesting a working group that's an ongoing place where these issues can be aired, because I think all of us will feel a lot of sympathy and perhaps recognition in hearing everyone's stories tonight. But it's as traumatic as some of these things are, it's not sadly a one-off that we can guarantee things will never happen again. It's a piece of work that we need to keep revisiting to ensure that we treat everybody fairly and respectfully.
Thank you. Any other members? In which case, could I ask Councillor Jones to respond, please?
I'd like to thank everyone for their contributions and discussion, and I think one of the things that comes through really clearly is the importance of truth. But I also think we need that also to really focus on the distinction between healthy debate, which is crucial, and it tipping over to aggression. And that might feel something of a perception issue, but I think it's about thinking on how something's received. I would also ask all members to consider that you hold a privileged role. We are elected to represent the people of Norwich. And when you give your credibility to a group, an individual, please think about what you are promoting or supporting. It might not always be obvious, but you give them airtime, and we do have an ability to promote something sometimes, so that's really important to consider. I'd also just like to finish with, it's not all negative, in the sense that I am incredibly proud to be a councillor in this city, and I've been elected since 2016. And I think, I've met some amazing people, and most residents, most members of the general public are fantastic, but the minority are an issue. But saying that, when there is a problem, whilst there is more work we can do, I would like to say that there is an exceptional response for our officers when there is an issue, and that was something that gave me a massive amount of security and probably made me stay as a councillor. So I'd like to thank them as well.
Thank you very much. So I'll now move to the vote. All those in favour, please indicate. That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Well, members will be pleased to note that I started this meeting at 19:30 based on my laptop clock, and my laptop currently says 21:31. So as we've reached the 2-hour mark of the meeting, I need to ask if any of the remaining items can be taken as unopposed business. Does any member wish to oppose any of the remaining items? In which case they're taken as unopposed. Thank you very much. Good night. And don't forget the extra meeting.